Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Metropolis Radio. Today we are taking a look at this article from Screen Rant here that asks the question, why do great directors need to insult the MCU's filmmakers? Many prominent directors have criticized the MCU for being repetitive and stifling creative freedom. Here's why that's completely wrong. Maybe some of the criticisms are misplaced, but I don't believe all of them are completely misplaced. But before we get a little ahead of ourselves here, let's dig into this. Despite the series' phenomenal critical and commercial success, many prominent directors continue to criticize the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Yeah, like anything that's popular. When rock and roll was popular, oh my god, rock and roll is the devil's music. Then when you had Pokemon hit the scene, Pokemon is a sin, and then Dungeons and Dragons was blowing up. Dungeons and Dragons is the gateway to devil worship, according to this televangelist. Give me money, give me money, give me money, give me money. The likes of Martin Scorsese, Denis Villeneuve, and Ken Loach, I think it's Ken Loach, I've never heard of him, have all made their disdain for Marvel clear over the years, often alienating fan bases as a result. We'll get into that by the end. I've got a lot of words for MCU fanboys here. The reasons behind this criticism often focus on perceived flaws in the superhero formula. However, behind the barrage of negativity, there is something much more complex at work. Since the late 2000s, superhero movies have been the dominant force at the box office. To date, the entire MCU has grossed an astonishing $22.93 billion. And yes, that is billion with a B. With the concluding chapter in the Phase 3 saga, Avengers Endgame, becoming the highest grossing movie ever at the time of release, thanks to an astonishing $2.8 billion global box office. Beyond ticket sales, the films have also been consistent hits critically, with audiences praising the saga's unique blend of humor, action, strong performances, and breathtaking special effects. In fact, every single film in the MCU has been rated as quote-unquote fresh or better by the review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, highlighting Marvel Studios' consistency. Again, Rotten Tomatoes has absolutely no credibility, so personally, I don't give two fucks what they rate it. Despite the MCU's prolonged and ongoing success, however, many of the biggest names in the industry have made it clear that they are not fans. For all the on-screen pyrotechnics and intricate world building, many claim that the films themselves are derivative and offer little scope for creative freedom, with some even going so far as to suggest that they represent a cut and paste job from one movie to the next. Considering the reputations of some of the MCU's biggest critics, it's hard not to take them seriously. However, after close consideration, it's clear that not only are many comments invalid, but that they also reveal something important about the film industry as a whole. Now, this article goes into 4 separate points here with regards to these directors criticizing the MCU. Oh my god, the humanity! So, without further dilly-dallying, let's just get right into the first point that they make. While there's no shortage of big-name directors who have looked down their noses at Marvel over the years, it's rarely the case that their comments come without provocation. In many cases, juicy quotes from the like of Villeneuve, Ridley Scott, and others come from longer interviews with journalists. The reason why interviewers return to the subject time and time again are extremely transparent. As easily the most commercially successful and dominant genre in modern cinema, superhero movies naturally have a huge target on their back. In any major artistic movement, whether in music, literature, or film, it's inevitable that the most popular style in any particular moment will come in for criticism from the rest of the industry. Invariably, this is due to an understandable frustration that other equally valid works don't attract deserved attention, coupled with an element of jealousy. After all, it's hard not to feel a little envious of a near $3 billion film that has a perceived lack of creative integrity. Okay, so let me go ahead. I'll stop right there. Where did this whole criticizing the MCU start? Well, it really started with Martin Scorsese back in last October of 2019. And here is like the juxtaposition of what he said. Quote, "I don't see them. I tried, but that's not cinema. Honestly, the closest I can think of them, as well made as they are, with actors doing the best they can under the circumstances, is theme parks. It isn't cinema of human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to another human being. End quote. This is where all this shit started, and this line right here, where was it? Invariably, this is due to an understandable frustration that other equally blah blah blah. Okay, coupled with an element of jealousy. Okay, this author is extremely ignorant to film history. Let's say this thing, it happened to film noir. Started to take off in the late 1930s, really exploded in the 40s, but then died in the 1950s. Westerns, it was the exact same thing. Gangster movies, the type of film that Martin Scorsese came up in, that, you know, made him an A-list movie director, along with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino movie stars, that became a dead genre. Then you had the disaster movies that started in the 70s, really blew up in the 90s, but died. Then you had the zany comedies like Airplane and Top Secret. There was an abundance of them in the 80s, but they ultimately died out in the 90s. So again, if you're trying to write off all criticism as, oh, they're just jealous, no, it's you that's incredibly ignorant to film history. Let's get that straight. Although the MCU is about much more than regurgitating the same formula, it is true that some directors do not enjoy the same level of freedom that they would on a solo project. Marvel is famed for its multiple timelines and interconnected narrative thread, which means that each movie has an obligation to the wider storyline. Understandably, certain directors find this stifling. Edgar Wright, for instance, left Ant-Man due to his frustration at not being able to make the movie that he wanted. This tension, coupled with the level of recognition that these multi-billion-dollar franchises enjoy among the public, makes Marvel a never-ending source of drama for the press. Thanks to both the genre's popularity and the unique creative vision of the MCU, there will always be a conflict between more independent auteurs and those happy to work together in service of a larger story. But again, they do have a point when they say that it's stifling creativity, because these filmmakers cannot leave their imprint on this particular franchise, which leaves the franchise with no character. While both the movie's popularity and requirements for narrative consistency explain why some filmmakers might feel resentful, these factors do not justify claims of uniformity. Within the same cinematic universe, Marvel has actually been able to create a myriad of different stories that span multiple different genres. Excuse me. The fact that the studio has been able to incorporate so many unique styles while maintaining a largely cohesive storyline across so many films actually highlights just what a significant movie-making achievement the MCU really is. But again, I just brought up film history. Eventually, the superhero movie will go the way of the Western. Take, for instance, films like Captain America: The Winter Soldier and Guardians of the Galaxy. The former is a modern spy thriller that nods to genre classics like 3 Days of the Condor. That is a bunch of bullshit. While the latter is a space-hopping sci-fi adventure that feels more Star Wars than superhero. Okay, that one, actually, no, it doesn't, no, it's not. The Guardians of the Galaxy is not Star Wars. Do you know what Guardians of the Galaxy is? It's basically Farscape the movie, if you really think about it. Peter Quill is the only human, and he's on a ship with a bunch of alien fugitives trying to outrun the law. That was fucking Farscape. But you know, it doesn't surprise me that this author doesn't know what Farscape is, because you have to really be into sci-fi in order to know what that is. Each film charts its own path and features a completely unique aesthetic and narrative. In both films, the wider MCU story is equal parts incidental and integral. This highlights not only how unique the films are, but what a complicated balancing act every Marvel director has to perform. To dismiss this delicate tightrope as simple cut and paste, as a simple cut and paste job, misunderstands just what it takes to build a complete and cohesive on-screen universe while keeping every entry feeling fresh and interesting. But again, if every origin story feels the exact same, I don't care if you have, Ant-Man versus Doctor Strange, if both feel the same, then yeah, people are gonna say it's a cut and paste job. Thanks to the studio's ongoing success, having a go at Marvel is low-hanging fruit for the rest of the movie-making industry. However, the implication that proper directors won't go near the MCU is an insult to the range of talented personnel that have contributed to the franchise as it is today. Further still, the suggestion that Marvel directors are somehow irrelevant to the look and feel of the end result is not only disparaging, it's also demonstrably untrue. Over the years, for instance, the direction of the entire MCU project has been molded thanks to the input of visionaries such as Jon Favreau, director of Iron Man. Okay, I'll give you Jon Favreau. Kenneth Branagh, director of Thor. I'll give you Kenneth Branagh. And Taika Waititi, who I believe only did like 1 or 2 movies before Thor Ragnarok. Although elements of the story are non-negotiable, it's undeniable that each Marvel director brings his or her own stamp to a particular project. Taika Waititi's Thor Ragnarok, for instance, is a hilarious blend of classic superhero action with the off-the-wall humor that defined the director's previous projects, such as What We Do in the Shadows, resulting in a completely original film. Well, let's be clear why Thor Ragnarok is a comedy. It's only a comedy because I think it was Chris Hemsworth threatened to not do the movie if it was a serious Shakespearean type movie again. Waititi himself said of making the movie that though he felt like a guest in Marvel's universe, he still had the creative freedom to do what he wanted. This goes to show that a great and undeniably unique director can still thrive within the MCU framework. Again, by the time you get to Thor Ragnarok, the formula has already been quite established. Just as a great director can work to create a great MCU movie, a bad director cannot deliver on the same level. Before anything else, MCU movies are still inescapably movies. Each film requires all the same elements of storytelling, visual style, and creative choice that determine whether any movie will ultimately be successful. The only real difference is the connection to a wider arc. There's no doubt that some directors may struggle with having such an overbearing presence dictate what they can and can't do. However, as the history of the MCU makes plain, plenty of seriously talented people succeed. But see, this in and of itself is the problem. And where was it? It's undeniable, blah, 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 blah. Oh, okay, here we go. It was right here. Although elements of the story are non-negotiable. So exactly what can a filmmaker do if they can't, like, explore outside the walls? It's no. This is exactly what needs to happen in the movie, come hell or high water. You've basically turned these quote-unquote visionary directors into nothing more than hired guns. If elements of the story are non-negotiable, basically this has to happen exactly this way because of interconnectivity that we are fucking marrying to, despite the fact that we probably shouldn't have to begin with. The MCU's epic 20-plus film approach to telling one central story marks it out as a unique achievement in the history of cinema. However, despite this clear point of difference between it and other films, the fundamentals that make up the individual components in that central story are remarkably similar to almost every other large-scale filmmaking project, although there are undoubtedly thematic similarities, such as good versus evil or a far-fetched origin. These are tropes that appear across the entire industry, not just superhero movies, and such, the supposed conflict between the MCU and other quote-unquote real films is actually complete fiction. Okay, 20-plus film approach to telling one central story marks it out as a unique achievement in the history of cinema. There have been other long-running franchises that ran a lot longer than the MCU, and I'll give you a perfect example was the Charlie Chan films. I believe they started in the 1920s, and they made 44 movies over 60 years. You have the James Bond franchise where the 25th movie is about to release this upcoming October 2021, and that franchise has been going for damn near 60 years. But again, where Charlie Chan and James Bond, differentiate from the MCU is that both of those franchises have a very loose continuity. And, and a lot of people point to, if you like Star Wars but trash the MCU for using interconnectivity, then that makes you a hypocrite. The MCU uses interconnectivity almost to a fault. They are relying too much on continuity where you have to keep watching the next movie. And realistically, that was never going to be a good plan long term. Let's be 100% honest. How do you even get into the MCU at this point? You have to start watching from Iron Man, and then you can get up and watch up to movie number 45 or number 72. No, effectively, you're going to create, the gap is going to be so large that you're not going to add in new fans like Charlie Chan and James Bond did. Well, Charlie Chan, to be fair, did disappear from the popular culture, but James Bond is still going to this day after damn near 60 years, because you could jump into James Bond at any point in time, with the exception of the Daniel Craig era, but that's something I've gone over in depth already. For example, Dune director Denis Villeneuve, who recently lambasted the MCU for its repetitive and derivative elements, regularly incorporates themes and elements into his own work that superhero fans would be able to instantly recognize. Arguably, a film like Blade Runner 2049, which features the almost vigilante-style pursuit of fugitive replicants across a futuristic alternative reality, has a lot more in common with many mass crime-fighting stories than Villeneuve would like to admit. Again, that is a false comparison. You're comparing a film noir to a superhero movie. There's a lot more to Blade Runner than just the pursuit of fugitive replicants. While that may be the plot, that's not the overall story. And yes, there is a difference between story and plot. So stop creating these false fucking comparisons. A central Marvel criticism is the pernicious idea that superhero films are nothing more than a cynical cash grab based around commodifying fan loyalty to pre-existing artistic material. Okay, you do have a point there. This suggestion, however, completely fails to recognize the success of the MCU for what it is. As the DCEU struggle proves, it's not enough to just combine a group of popular characters in front of the camera and expect results. It takes genuine vision and almost superhuman organization to pull together multiple disparate threads to create a satisfying and successful story. In many ways, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is very different to the rest of the film industry. However, as many of its critics should appreciate, being unique is not the same as being a failure. They do have a point here when it's like, you're based around commodifying fan loyalty to pre-existing artistic material. Yeah, because original shit gets pushed to the side in favor of pre-existing material. So the odds of the next Martin Scorsese coming up through the ranks or the next Quentin Tarantino are very soon becoming slim to none. In the end, guys, this author here is completely ignorant to film history. As I pointed out earlier in this video, film noir went through the exact same thing, where it started in the 30s, had a huge surge of popularity in the 40s, and died out in the 50s. Same with the westerns, same with disaster movies, same with, gangster movies that Martin Scorsese came up during. They got huge in the 1970s, but then by, late 80s, early 90s, it had effectively been a dead genre. Now, does the genre being dead mean that it's gone for good? No, there are some great movies that still release in dead genres. When I think westerns, I think, Open Range with Kevin Costner and Robert Duvall. That was a great western. And then you also had HBO's Deadwood. Those came out long after the genre had been long but dead. But, are the westerns making a huge comeback? No. And the same thing is going to happen to these superhero movies. Yes, they got hotly popular in the late 2000s, but we're already seeing this period of deconstruction. And you really saw this, and most people put it in like 2014 with Guardians of the Galaxy, but you really see it with shows like Invincible on Amazon, also movies like Logan and The Boys. actually The Boys was a show, where it's a complete deconstruction of the genre. That is the last step in any genre before the genre is declared dead. And the big reason I cannot stand MCU fanboys is because they refuse to acknowledge this. Now, let's answer the question, why do great directors need to insult the MCU's filmmakers? Well, because to be quite blunt, outside of the first phase of the MCU, no filmmaker has had a unique imprint on the MCU as a whole. When you watch Phase 1, when you're talking Iron Man, Iron Man 2, The Incredible Hulk, Thor, Captain America the First Avenger, and the Avengers, each movie had a distinct look and feel to it. You can tell when watching Iron Man and Iron Man 2, you were watching a Jon Favreau movie. You could tell you were watching a Kenneth Branagh movie with Thor. You can tell you were watching a Joe Johnston movie with Captain America First Avenger. And you can tell you were watching a Joss Whedon movie with the First Avengers movie. They all had these distinct feelings to them. And then after the success of the Avengers, that's when Kevin Feige basically came in and assumed creative control over everything and basically kicked him out. And guys, a perfect example of this is Avengers Age of Ultron, the last MCU movie that Joss Whedon directed. Did you know that Kevin Feige wanted that farmhouse scene cut? Yes, the one scene that had true character in the movie, Kevin Feige wanted it fucking gone. So what the hell does Kevin Feige know? How much great character moments had to be cut or sacrificed for the sake of a joke, or the fact that there wasn't crash, boom, bam, big explosion, left, right, up, down, and center every 30 seconds? Until these filmmakers come forward, we truly never know. But guys, I want to know what you think. Do you think that, that the MCU filmmakers are these great directors, or are they just hired guns at this point? And guys, with that, I'm going to go ahead and end it right here. If you stuck around this long, thanks so much for doing so. And if you guys have been following me long enough, you know I'm terrible at ending these videos, so I will just see you guys next time.